Hello, my name is Jenna Henshaw. I am here today to talk to you about the history of anime and the influence it has had in Japan as well as in America. It all started out in 1914 whenever early Japanese cartoonists were very infatuated with the comic book strips that were in Western papers. They started playing around with moving pictures and how to string them together to tell a story. The very first 3 feature films were only 1 to 5 minutes long, and they only fit on 1 roll of film, which was gigantic. The very first successful short film was called Momotaro, or Peach Boy in English, and it was made by Kitayama Seitaro. One of his only works that we have found from the earliest of Japanimation. Right before the war, there was a milestone of Chikara to Ono no Yono Naka, and it was the very first Japanese talkie, or the very first film that actually spoke. Early anti-American propaganda started, and that's whenever they really started getting the hang of the moving pictures. A lot of their anti-American propaganda started with American cartoons like Mickey Mouse and Felix the Cat. They had them portraying bad guys. One particular one, for instance, is called Mickey Attacks Japan. And it has him flying around in planes and everything, attacking, and then he comes in and is saved by some of the most historical figures in Japanese history. In other regions of the world, people like Walt Disney and the Fleischer Bros were breaking new ground on their animation success. Their popularity and their influence was felt around the world, as we all know now. These works so inspired one man that he was able to alter the progression of the anime and manga history as we know it. A man by the name of Osamu Tezuka. He became a cartoonist after World War II, and he was only 20 years old. His very first work was called The New Treasure Island, and very shortly after he created that, he became one of the world's most renowned manga artists, and he was only 23, and he was actually referred to as a manga god. His approach was completely and utterly different. They'd never seen it before, because he was so influenced by the Disney animation and their expressive features, their big eyes and their tiny mouths. He was very influenced, and that actually is what started what we know today as the big-eyed anime characters. Then came along a man named Hiroshi Okawa. He had a dream that he wanted to create a company that would make Japanese films, feature films. And he realized that dream in 1956, and he became the president of a company called Toei. Later then, he partnered with Tezuka, and they began working on screenplays and storyboards for the first Toei feature, which was called Pilgrimage to the West. It was actually based off the Monkey King legend. After this film aired, Tezuka founded Osamu Tezuka Production Animation Department, or later called Mushi Productions. His goal was to create episodic animated features or series like we know today. His premiere series was Tetsuwan Atom, or Astro Boy, which we've all come to know and love. It was the first regularly animated feature or series with a recurring acting cast. Now, it wasn't the first animated series, someone else beat him to it, but they focused more on education versus entertainment. Mushi Productions continued producing series until, unfortunately, I believe in 1979 they went bankrupt. But Osamu Tezuka still kept working, he still kept creating, he couldn't leave his work. Most series around this time were strictly for children, surprisingly, and there were certain exceptions like Eighth Man and Speed Racer, and as a whole, most of the series were good versus evil, bad guy, good guy, that kind of stuff. Moving into the 1970s, they were taking a more sophisticated approach with animes like Lupin the Third, which is very comical and very adult. It features a character who is kind of what you would think of as a James Bond now, only horrible with the ladies. During this time, science fiction and the mecha genres really took off due to the infatuation with space operas in the United States, which would be Star Wars and stuff of that like, bringing about one of the greatest, some of the greatest animated series like Star Blazers, Pokemon, and The Great Mazinger. With this influence from the space operas, one of the most renowned series that has come from this is Mobile Suit Gundam, and it became a nationwide obsession, completely and utterly. It's considered the first fandom because so many spin-offs have been made of it. The merchandise for it was insane and the first that they'd ever seen. Moving into the 1980s, the demand for these sophisticated shows really began to take off. They couldn't keep up with everything. So they started having to look into the manga artists and the manga comics, and this later referred to, or resulted in the animations of popular mangas. One of the first to benefit was Akira Toriyama. He first created what was known as Dr. Slump. I couldn't find a picture of it, unfortunately, but he wasn't really known for that. He then created one of the holy grails for anime fans in 1986, and it's one of the largest worldwide known, and as I said earlier, becomes the Monkey Legend King. Based off of that, he created Dragon Ball Z, or Dragon Ball, whichever you prefer. In 1988, the artist and director, Katsuhiro Otomo, created the groundbreaking film hit. It was internationally accepted. It won numerous awards, and he created Akira, which was an entirely new style, an entirely new invention. It was gory, it was sci-fi, it was everything that they wanted in one film. Equally as influential as Otomo was Masamune Shirow. He created the Smash Hit Appleseed, which isn't as popular as it used to be, but he was widely acknowledged in 1995 with the premiere of Ghost in the Shell. And this as well has had numerous spin-offs, and it's done monumentally well. And it also went back to the man versus machine like in Gundam. The two production companies that emerged from the 1980s and which really set off the nationwide boom of anime was Gainax and Studio Ghibli. Starting off with Gainax, they are most famous for Gunbuster, and also one of the most controversial animes to date because they just don't know when to quit. This series has so many spin-offs, so many movies, and it just keeps getting worse. And that would be Neon Genesis Evangelion. Moving to Studio Ghibli, they had two creators from the original Toei company working for them. And they created the astounding Castle in the Sky, Kiki's Delivery Service, My Neighbor Totoro, and Princess Mononoke, as well as many others that we all know and love very well. With Disney and Studio Ghibli working together and other production companies starting to really connect with the US TV production, with the TV studios, they really brought in the first wave of anime to the US, which would be Pokemon, Sailor Moon, Dragon Ball came with it, of course. Okay. In conclusion, that is a very, very brief history of the history of anime. It goes far deeper than that. I just wanted to hit on the key points. Hopefully this has taught you something and maybe opened your mind. I owe a great deal of the research I did to the Michael O'Connell. He had this great history. It was still, I shortened that thing so much. It's so in-depth. And he's the one, that article really gave me all my information. Thank you for listening to me. I hope I've taught you something. I hope I didn't bore you to tears.